India's leading virtual career fair for diversity. Discover over 5,000 jobs at companies that celebrate you. Find a workplace that's equally yours between the 12th to the 14th of November. Enroll now.
The topic of the day is empowering women and building network. We have Deepali Naair here, who is going to touch upon the topic imposter syndrome and identifying and overcoming it. So thank you so much, Deepali, to be here with us. And I'm aware that this is the third time that you're participating in Triumph, and we have all the time gained so much of insight by your presence. So Deepali, previous to the CK Birla Group, she was associated with IBM as a digital and sales director, then moved on to become a CBO for IBM India and South Asia. Deepali comes with a varied experience in different industries, primarily in the financial sectors, and some of them are HSBC, IIFL, and L&T Infrastructure. Her contribution to Mahindra Holidays, where she made a lot of strategic changes leading to the growth in digital and sales, is much spoken about. Deepali also was a selected CMO of the year 2020 by Economic Times. And she is one of the speaker who represents in across forums on the globe on topics related to leadership, management, and digital marketing. So thank you so much, Deepali, for joining us in the Triumph session.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you for inviting me again and again. I think you guys are doing a great job on, touching the topic of women empowerment, women leadership, and encouraging more and more women to be, professionals.
So, Deepali, my first question to you is that self-doubt and constant comparison, is a common or the hardest thing that a woman faces in the workplace, right? So how do you think these, self-doubt and constant comparison is affecting the confidence of women and also impacting their performance in the organization?
I think self-doubt and constant comparison is something that both men and women inherit while they're still at school. However, I think given lesser opportunities for women, given lesser encouragement that they face, and what I call the double jeopardy, of managing both home and work, it becomes accentuated, when it comes to women. So if you're a working woman, it's not that you're not going to get compared to other women who are stay at home. You're compared as a mother, you're compared as a hostess, you're compared as a cook, and of course there are comparisons with other women leaders, and there are comparison with men at work also, because you are responsible for delivering the same task that somebody else who's your peer, could be a man, is delivering. So the constant comparison is a context that we live with that leads to self. I faced it, and very famously, I've made the classical mistake, which in books is written not to do, and one knows it in the head, but it doesn't happen. I still remember when I was with L&T Insurance, my boss called me in and said, I used to look after e-commerce, I used to look after brand marketing, and said, I'm going to give you additional portfolio. So I said, yes, till then it was fine. Okay, I was very happy. And said, you're going to now start looking after customer service. You know what was my first reaction? My first reaction was, I've never done it before. No. So my manager felt confident. I mean, we of course had a conversation. He felt confident about me being able to do it. But that was my first reaction, that I haven't done it before. I, of course, now have the confidence of going through that incident and many more to know that, look, I can take on new things. But experience has, built that. But when you are faced with something new, you do have self-doubt. Um, all I want to say here is that everybody goes through it, but I think how quickly you recover from it, how you reflect on it and learn what you should do the next time around, and then if you have the self-doubt, how you prepare yourself for dealing with a new assignment, new job, new everything. And I think it's a bit like the new shadi. uh, Women have self-doubt when they're getting into a new family, into a new
Oh,
relationship
yes.
also.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so work is no different, but I think preparation is what would help.
My another question to you is that as a women, we see that there is a gap of women in the leadership positions. So, first of all, I would want to understand whether you agree with it or not. But that lack of representation of women at the top is also is having an impact on the confidence and the chances of growth for the women in the organization. So, do you relate the two? And yeah, would love to hear on this.
So slightly longish answer to this. Okay,
Sure.
there is a gap. In 1993, when I passed out of my MBA, I had a job, on the campus. I started working with Tata Motors, it used to be called Telco then.
Yeah.
I was the one of the two first female management trainees that they had ever hired. Okay.
Yeah.
So that tells you the gap. Okay. Uh, I, many years later, worked for another very large engineering organization. And I went to their corporate headquarters. On the floor where all the senior people sat, there was a executive washroom for men, um, and there was a washroom for men, and then there was a washroom for women. There was no executive washroom for women, right? And that was not too many years ago. That's about 17 years ago. In the last 10 or 12 years, I'm often the only woman, on the table reporting into the CEO. The two organizations where it has been very different, Priyanka, has been HSBC and IBM. IBM, of course, has been on the other side,
Yeah.
where women are encouraged, and it's the conscious call that IBM does, and they are just absolutely superb in everything that they do in terms of encouraging diversity of all kinds, not just gender. But I must acknowledge that the gap exists. Quite
So, in continuation to it, I was asking, since there is a gap, and we know that there is a gap, is it also impacting the confidence or of the women who are looking forward to take that particular position? So, because there's no role model or less role model, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely. It is, I think most women will go through a situation where they will be a first. In this organization, I was the first CXO. In this organization, I'm the first CEO, or I'm applying for a CEO. It's the first time they are considering, women for the role. And some of this is silent biases that we don't even know of. We have no idea whether the board has ever considered a female to be a candidate or not,
Yeah.
for a CEO position. We don't know why a woman has never been a CXO, or this kind of a CXO. There are cases of organizations where you have had CHROs and CMOs being women, but they may have never had a female CFO. They may have never had a female sales director, and so on and so forth, right? They may not have had a female head of HR for a factory. Somebody I know just a few years back said, she was Unilever's first female factory head.
Yeah.
So those firsts are still happening. So there is a gap. So that does shake. It doesn't, I'm not saying it shakes your confidence, but it requires for you to be extra courageous.
No, no, very valid points that you covered, Dipali. I'll now go to identifying, as in how do you identify this imposter syndrome? So, we are aware that self-doubt can hold women back from seizing any opportunity in wherever they work, But many of women who are stuck with this syndrome, they do not realize that they are into this syndrome. So my question to you is that how can a woman realize that they are stuck in this cycle of imposter syndrome? And what are the empowering steps that they should take to break free from this?
Priyanka, you're from HR, you are from a domain who's an expert perhaps at this thing. I think as a practitioner and as somebody who's lived the corporate life for the last 30 years, my experience is that first step to identifying whatever syndrome it is acknowledging and saying that you can do more and that there is something inhibiting you. The something inhibiting you could be in the environment or it could be within you. I think first step is an acknowledgement of that you could achieve more, that you're meant for better things, or whatever it is. The moment a thought crosses your mind, I think what helped me when I was at a point when I was a little confused about my career is having a coach. And this was a coach that I retained on my own and not through the organization. So I felt absolutely safe in terms of discussing whether it was my self doubt, whether it was my career ambition and goals, whether it was discussing the environment, that I was, working in and and I liked the conversation, the first conversation that I had with the coach, and my whole intention was I want to change if required. I want to discover more about myself. I want to discover what careers am I best suited for. And those questions did get answered. In the process, I discovered the best environments for me to thrive at. I discovered what my strengths were. I also discovered what were my weaknesses, which environments will ensure that my strengths play out and which environments might keep me back because my weaknesses will play out over there. I think it's a journey. You don't know that it's self-doubt that's keeping you back, but if you start a journey to discover yourself, I think you will discover all sorts of things that may create the self-doubt, and in the process you'll do better. One of the tools that I do not practice as often as I should be is reflection. There are people that I know and great leaders who reflect daily on how their day has been. There are people who reflect every week how their week has been. I do it annually, not good enough, I will say that. But I think reflection is another great tool if you can devote 20 minutes to how your day has been, personal or professional, because like I mentioned earlier, self-doubt can creep in even, in your personal life. I think the reflection will help you tremendously.
No, thank you for the tips. I'm sure most of the women who are listening right now will take the learning from here. And I totally, second this thought. In my career as well, I've seen that a coach made such a huge difference. And especially when you are transitioning to the leadership role with complexities and you do not know whether you'll be able to do it, I think that phase, the role of a coach becomes immensely important. So thank you for that insight. So my next question to you, Deepali, now is, so most of the time there is a pressure to over prepare and avoid tasks out of failure. There are women that we have seen that either they are over prepared or they are fearful of, and they would want to avoid that. Don't give me this challenge, I can't do it. Now, how can building a strong network help women identify and overcome these tendencies? And what can they do to strike a balance at?
Failure is a part of life. I think the problem and the challenge is that I, with my 30 years of experience, will say it. I think, Priyanka, you will say it, given the role that you're doing. But when we are in our 30s, we listen to it, but we don't know it for sure. We typically have a situation that you've been to a good school, good college, get a job. You've seen success almost every time in your so-called career path, and there is nothing that will go wrong in the first 10 years of your life. Also, you will just go from job to job, assignment to assignment. It hits you really in your late 30s and early 40s, the first time that you have to deal with failure, and it's tough. uh, you know I think having all kinds of network over there helps. uh, Network of family, people who you can talk to about it, and families will support you unconditionally. And it can be different people. It needn't always be a spouse. It needn't always be a sister. It can be a sister-in-law. It can be a brother. It can be mother-in-law. It can be mother. They may not comprehend exactly what your work situation is, and then you may not be able to tell them the details, but I think they will empathize and they will emotionally support you. And I think that network is important. I think the second network is important is of professionals that you have met, over the years. These could be men and women. I think the men, because I mean it's a given and it's documented that men come from a huge sense of entitlement. The men will tell you actually, which is great to hear sometimes, to say, "Don't worry, it's okay." You know, that's
Yeah.
also great to hear. And I think the women will empathize differently. They may share with you how they've probably gone through it too, or that it happens, or they've heard about somebody else. I think you will find that network of either like minded people or supporters or people who will encourage you. I doubt that in your network anybody will discourage you when you're down and feeling low. Some of them will give you tips on how to deal with it. Some of them will provide emotional support for the long term or for the moment. And I think all of it works, on your network. But the important thing here is, Priyanka, that we sometimes don't make the effort of developing a trusted network. We've just so insulated and, we've isolated ourselves that we don't know who to go and talk to suddenly, because you do require a trusted network. When I'm talking to another woman leader, I need to be able to talk to somebody who I can trust to never go and repeat what I'm saying to them.
Correct.
Need
Yeah.
that safe space.
Yeah.
So you must invest in building a network. It's not important whether your network is 10 people or 5 or 2, but over the years, you should build network. The third thing, people don't build networks of other people who are positive and mature. You know, you can share things with your children, but it may not matter. They may not be able to offer you advice. You should have people who have been through different experiences and who are mature and who are positive. There's no point going and sharing stuff with a person who himself is down at the moment and will pull you down, along with him or her. So
Yeah.
that's third. That is very important. That overall surround yourself with people who are positive. I did not use the word successful. I used the word positive.
No, no, very valid. As in, I really like the perspective of 360-degree network approach that you had, especially with people who are positive and who will align your thought towards something meaningful in your life rather than, filling you with negativity and all that. Must avoid, for sure. Okay, so sometimes we downplay our achievements and struggle to accept praise. Very common in women, right?
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
how can building a supportive network of mentors and peer help us become more confident in owning our success?
If you read the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, it is well documented that women, the men are congratulated for a job well done at work. He'll say, yes, thank you. And women will say, no, the team did it, or I share this with, too many other people. So it's just very common and it's documented, right? Uh, One is having that same thing that I mentioned earlier, reflection, coach, and then network. All three help because all three over a period of time will teach you to be able to say just thank you and accept it. I think if you have that trusted network who you trust to tell you the truth, who is positive, you know when they come and praise you, then you accept it, then you know that you have done it. I think that's what is important. There are times when I have a friend who will tell me saying, you did this, why aren't you putting it out on LinkedIn? I go through this, right? And why aren't you putting this award on LinkedIn? Or why you just went for this talk and you were in a panel discussion, why didn't you put this on LinkedIn? I'm like, really, is it important? And somebody will tell you, yes, it is important.
Very valid as in pointers and very practical points. And when you actually look at women, anything that you do, it's like, it's okay. It wasn't that tough as in we did it. So what's great about it and why to talk about it? But yes, it's very important at a certain point of time and as you're growing in the career to start accepting the success, because a lot of effort goes when dealing with imposter syndrome. So you've touched, Dipali, on this. Now, how do you think having the right mentor helps women, and how should one find the right mentor?
Early on in my life, I believed that it was important to have female mentors, and there weren't enough women leaders around. You know, it's only very late now, after reading, talking, after being part of leadership, I realized that it's equally important for women to have male mentors. Because they will open the doors, they will clear the path for you. And like I gave you my example of my boss telling me, look after customer
Can do
service.
it,
And,
yeah.
I mean, he was a great mentor, manager, sponsor, is what I would say. So that's what mentors do, which is that even if it is somebody younger, I feel that they can be a mentor for me for this particular domain. Like, when this whole digital marketing is new to all of us, things change all the time.
Right.
But there is somebody who's a micro expert, let's say at mobile, stuff. Or there's somebody else who's an expert at email marketing, you know? Or there's somebody else who's an expert in the domain of SEO. There are these people that I call and I appreciate them. I stay in touch with them. I, encourage them in different ways. I may not tell them that you're my mentor on this particular domain, but I treat them in my head as mentors. They are my go-to people for learning, new things.
Thank you so much for that input. And I'm sure, again, as I said earlier, these are practical things. And I'm sure people who are listening should pick up on this, that, if there is something new, learning and whatever something new is coming, as in just keep going for learning the new thing, adding to your portfolio and profile, and come out of this.
So I get approached a lot on LinkedIn to say, can I talk to you? Can you be my mentor? And things like those, right? And within 30 minutes of conversation, I get a resume, can you give me a job in your team? Or, can you send my resume somewhere? Now, understand the purpose of having a mentor. This is a person that you can go to and speak to. He or she may not be able to open the doors for you immediately. It's a long-term relationship that you're building.
Yeah.
They may not even feel like opening the door for you because they don't know you well enough. You only met them for 30 minutes ever in your life, right? So be conscientious and conscious about who you're going to for mentorship.
So now when it comes to creating a truly inclusive environment, so from the corporate overall I'm talking about, what do you think leaders can do to ensure that women feel empowered and don't have to deal with imposter syndrome all the time?
I think one of the things, and this I learned at IBM, right? If you measure it, it gets done, right? So is the case on diversity. So, right? A lot of the times, what gets reported is overall diversity, and the women are at junior roles. They may be a few at mid-manager level, but they're not there at senior manager level. Are you measuring, as leaders? Your company may or may not have a policy, but if as a leader you want to be a truly inclusive leader, measure inclusivity at every level. That's the most important thing. Your organization could be an MNC and maybe measuring inclusivity on ethnic background. It may not even be gender, but measure it. Report it to yourself. Forget anybody else. That first step will give you some more questions, perhaps. Why isn't it happening? Why aren't we able to move the needle? The moment you get into the why, you will also get the answers, because each organization is different. Each organization's context and life stage is different. What may be applicable in one place may or may not matter in another place.
Yeah. Any priority which organization is driving, if it is not measured, then I'm sure the goal is not achieved. But if we are talking about certain programs or initiatives, which you think that the companies can roll out and which can help women tackle self-doubt and that fear of failure, especially when they're trying to step into leadership roles?
I think organizations acknowledging that the transition can be a tough one, not just for women. It can be the transition, like you yourself said, you're transitioning into a senior leadership role. It can be tough for a man also. I think having a program to support the transition is extremely important. And you're an HR expert, you know, in different ways these programs can be designed. Second important thing is identifying high potential women managers when they were young. You know, and ensuring that they stay, you know, with the organization, and then you see them through their various life stages, getting married, having a baby, having a parent who could be unwell, or in-laws who could be, you know, unwell. All that is, you know, important.
I really like that, at various stages of women, married, parenthood, then the older parents, you're a caregiver, and during these stages is when I think the imposter syndrome troubles you maximum. So thank you so much, Deepali, for such insightful and enriching conversations. And I really liked your sharing your experiences on this topic, which is so important, the imposter syndrome, identifying and overcoming it. I hope the listeners would have benefited out of it, and hope to meet you again in next Triumph.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you for inviting me. I encourage, I think, all the listeners to read the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. It is a defining book, according to me, which explains the issues that women go through. And of course, please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. Read some of the posts that I have done earlier on learning agility, on how I found an extra month in a year, you know, by delegating cooking and by delegating driving. You know, so those are interesting things to also read, and those are also hacks that women require. Today we were discussing a serious topic on imposter syndrome, but I think balancing your life and enjoying your life is also equally important. But thank you, Priyanka, and I think kudos to your organization for driving these conversations and for making them available, you know, and encouraging women professionals.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye.